Hey everyone, this is the training ground for the 4-course bundle. I know many of you have been waiting for this because we got a lot of people asking for this, especially after we released the training grounds for the Mastering Price Action course. But finally here it is, and it's going to be big because the 4-course bundle is big, so we need a lot of examples to cover everything. My name is Amo. If you don't know me, I've been working with Urban Forex for a long time, and I've been answering many questions in all of the courses as well. I've been hosting conference rooms in the past, and I do all kinds of stuff besides the trading. In these training grounds, we will obviously go into the 4 main topics of the 4-course bundle, which is correlation, supply and demand, timing, and roadmap. And it will be a lot. I can't say that enough. So without further ado, let's start with week 1, which is finding money flow. And I will be covering a few things here apart from some examples which will come up in the next videos. In this video, I will also cover the 5 points that you see in the lower right corner, which is looking at the same amount of data, not most recent territory, vertical line hack, which will also be covered in the examples, 6 or 7 pairs, and economy. So, oh, I see that I made a small mistake there, so let me correct that as I go. Okay, so looking at the same amount of data. So to find money flow, it is very important to look at the same amount of data all the time. So if I'm looking at a chart here, and let's say I want to know, this is the CAD group by the way, I want to know what is the money flow for CAD. Well, I don't want to just look at the most recent thing here, but I also want to make sure that for all of these different pairs, all 7 pairs, I'm looking at the same amount of data, because otherwise I can't compare them to each other. So if for the first one here, for instance, I'm going to say I'm going to look at this amount of data from 16th of April, 2300 hours onwards, then I have to do that for all of these pairs. I will explain this further in the upcoming details, but at least now we already have an idea what I mean. I've also mentioned just now that I will discuss not most recent territory, and this I can be very short about this. This just means that territories and finding money flow, so buyers and sellers, and finding money flow is not the same thing. There's a difference there. When we are talking about buyers and sellers, we're always talking about the most recent territory, right? Whether it's on your trading time frame or on your big boy time frame, we're always looking at the most recent or recent few territories. In finding money flow, we're always looking at more data than just the most recent territory. So those two things cannot be compared. I know we got a few questions about that. The vertical line hack, well, I've almost shown it already, but that is very much related to looking at the same amount of data. But as I said in the examples, I will go over that and how I use that. Then we get some questions every once in a while about what is strong and what is weak when people have 6 pairs or 7 pairs. So can be very short about that, and I'll update it in the text as well. I'll put it all the way downstairs. So strong, if you have 6 pairs, is anything that is 4 or above. Okay, let me write that out fully. 4 or higher, actually, that would be better English. Oh. Then weak, if you have 6 pairs, is -4 or lower. And then neutral, if you have 6 pairs, is anything in between, basically. So -3 to +3. So strong, if you have 7 pairs, that is 5 or higher. Weak, if you have 7 pairs, is -5 or lower. And neutral, if you have 7 pairs, is -4 to +4. So basically everything in between. Okay, let me move this a little bit so it's all in there. Let me move it in the middle right here. So that is what the strength numbers mean depending on whether you have 6 or 7 pairs. So I hope that answers that question once and for all. And then finally, one thing I would like to add is regarding economies. When we're talking about correlation, people always ask me, so which currencies always correlate with each other? Well, none. Up to a few years ago, there were some currencies that were generally or most of the time correlating with each other. Most notably are Australian dollar and New Zealand dollar, and this was up until 2013, 2014, if I'm not mistaken, so a few years ago already, or quite a few years. But that is no longer the case. They are not correlating with each other all the time anymore. However, we can still see that currencies that are in economies that are geographically close to each other, so Australia and New Zealand are geographically close to each other, we can see that many a time the currency groups from those two currencies, or the pairs from those two currency groups, do correlate a little bit. Or from time to time they even correlate a lot. But you cannot assume that they always correlate. So what are these groups? That's USD and CAD, because the US economy and the Canadian economy are obviously very big trading partners, so any big economic news will reflect on the other economy as well. The other economies are, I mentioned them already, Australian dollar and New Zealand dollar, so Australia and New Zealand. And then finally I have Great Britain, or the United Kingdom, and the Eurozone, and Switzerland. So that's the Swiss franc, the euro, and the Great Britain pound. So those are obviously all inside the European continent. So those last three, so they are, for obvious reasons, very tight-knit economically, just like the United States and Canada. So that leaves us with one currency left out a bit, and that's the Japanese yen. That one does correlate very often with different currencies, so that one moves around a little bit. So to repeat, you cannot assume that all of these will always correlate with each other, but from time to time you can see that there's some correlation, and it's more often than, for instance, Australian dollar with US dollar. Okay, so what's really important to note here is that there are obviously currencies, currency pairs that are a reflection of those two currencies, which in the case of the United States and Canada would be USD CAD, or a US dollar and Canadian dollar. So if the US dollar and the Canadian dollar are correlating, those whole groups, if those are correlating, there's a good chance that USD CAD is going to be in a range. And if the Australian dollar group and the New Zealand dollar group are correlating, there's a good chance Aussie New Zealand is in a range. So these kind of things are important to keep in mind, but again, they are not hard set rules. You cannot assume that they will always be correlating with each other. But it's good to know that sometimes they do, and then at those times, maybe USD CAD or Aussie New Zealand are not great pairs to trade. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope you will enjoy this this first video, and then I hope you will enjoy all of the training grounds. And yeah, for this video I'll leave it at this, and we're gonna jump straight into the next one. All right.